Hey folks, Zach Osterman, IU Insider, Indianapolis Star. It's the last one of 2023. He's Mike Niziolek, Bloomington Herald Times. Indiana 100, Kennesaw State 87. We can drill into like the specifics of the game. I think that the vibe of the game to me was that Kennesaw State got Indiana to play too fast. That's Kennesaw State's game. They were like, I think they were number one coming into this game in the country in adjusted tempo, according to KenPom. They are just all gas, no breaks. They don't play defense. They shoot tons of threes. Like they are just built to absolutely just wind you up and make you go. And Indiana kind of been into that. Probably didn't help that Indiana hit all those shots early and so suddenly Indiana felt like, oh great, we can play at this pace, we can score at this pace. And actually, I thought the game turned when both teams went to zone because Kennesaw State's was very bad. And Indiana's did not last long, but it slowed the game down. And it let Mike Woodson kind of find the lineup combination that got him over the line. Just another one of these games where Indiana wins, maybe not convincingly, but they do win.
Well, yeah, you should mention Khalil Ware was out of the lineup. Peyton Sparks started, played 14 minutes, 14 quality minutes, according to Mike Woodson, but he was good, 10 points, 8 rebounds, a couple of blocks. I think it's one of those things where you got on the non-conference schedule, you do what you need to do, and Mike Woodson again said, I asked him about what do you take away from the game, and he said, oh, we won. I should ask him, what do you take away from how you won? Because I think as you kind of get against teams with better competition, you're not going to be able to play with fire all the time.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to give up 17 threes and win a game in the Big Ten, I don't think at least. When you look back, going back the last, 14 years, they've only given up 17 or more three-pointers, or 15 or more three-pointers four times. This is the fourth, and they lost the other three. It's not a winning formula. And so I think, this team beat the competition it should, but the difficulty level is going to ratchet up now, and you've got to play more complete games because they do kind of go into lulls like that first 5 minutes of the second half, the last 5 minutes of the first half. They just kind of lost and sort of bumbled through a little bit, and then, turn it on at really good start, really good finish, but in between there, it got ugly, and they were down 4 points until things, they turned things around.
And, a funny game in the sense that, it looked like it was going to be a night for Mackenzie Mbako. He hit a bunch of shots early. He hit 4 threes early, and then he basically got benched. He only played 14 minutes. I cast aspersions. I didn't think Malik Renew looked 100% for parts of this game, and yet he had 34 points.
Yeah, he got knocked down at one point and just kind of sat there like, somebody going to help me out? The game's going on.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, you got
But, he's 13 of 19 from the floor, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, a career-high 34 points. And then some guys off the bench. Anthony Leal only scores 2 points. Mike Woodson said he had a couple really good days of practice coming out of the holiday break. He was a big piece of sort of finding that lineup that won the game, went smaller, and won the game for Indiana. And then Caleb Banks, who at times has kind of struggled off the bench. He's been really foul-prone at times. He only commits, 1 foul tonight, 12 points, 5 of 7 from the free throw line, 5 rebounds. Basically, like if we're just talking about this, like just sort of like metrically, he probably takes Mackenzie Mbako's minutes there in the second half for the most part. It's a team that I think you're allowed to have like tons of questions about and tons of sort of concern about, and yet it is a team that just, it's still hard for me to sort of pigeonhole, other than like a couple things, the 3-point issues being one of them. It's still hard for me to pigeonhole like exactly what is either going to be this team's strength or what it's going to be its downfall. There are times where it looks better for playing these 2 big lineups. Tonight it looked way better for going small. There are times where it gets absolutely blitzed behind the 3-point line and yet still wins the game. Now that's typically against kind of these level of opponents, but you're also not going to see Big Ten teams necessarily come in here and just sort of run chuck and chase offense.
But when you see a formula, they don't rebound well, long rebounds. That was again a problem today.
Yeah.
They turn the ball over a lot. And I think you pointed out one time where they did this really soft pass across the court. It's just like, that's not a good basketball play. They had way too many of those. On the turnovers, at one point it was like 8 steals, 9 turnovers. So they were
and again
sloppy,
just sort of game recognition, like Kennesaw State was making them play too fast. Yeah. They cannot play at that. They want to play on the break when they get turnovers, when they get long rebounds, because they don't want to have to run half-court offense. To be fair, everybody wants to do that. It's just a little bit more important for a team like this that can sometimes be challenged in the half-court and what it can do. But they can't play at that pace. And actually, if anything, those first few shots going in probably hurt them because it made them feel like that pace
Well, it was one of the first two that made the first 8. So,
yeah.
I mean, they had a lot of confidence.
It probably made them feel like, we can live at this pace.
It took a while for them to realize, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Not that team.
It stabilized. They still shot 61% from the floor. They shot 68%, almost 68% in the second half. Kennesaw State is not a very good defensive team. But again, it was very much just kind of like on... The game was being played way too much on Kennesaw State's terms, and that shouldn't happen against a Kennesaw State. If it's an Ohio State, if it's a Wisconsin, if it's a Purdue, that's different. And again, that's where I come back to, I can see the pockets of improvement. I can see the upshot in this team. I can also totally understand anybody who just thinks none of this is going to wash when we get to Big Ten play.
This is not a winning formula. Yeah, and the one thing I will say that I think benefits them is that they've played these close games and won them.
Thank you.
They've played these close games and won them. I think they've been tested, more battle tested than they probably should have been at this point. They haven't had a lot of comfortable wins, but this was a 13-point win. It was not comfortable. And so, again, I think Woodson's used this phrase a couple of times. They didn't fold, and that's, I think, good for when you're going to be tested because, once the quality of opponents go up, this team's going to probably be fighting from behind a little more than they have been. A lot of these games have been, lost leads, but I think it's going to be the opposite in Big Ten. They're going to need to fight their way back, and at least they've faced some tests in that way. Maybe they shouldn't have, but they've succeeded, and we've talked about how they're very young. And now, can they get healthy? Clear obviously was just an illness. And Xavier Johnson's making steps. He's, it seems like
he's close
in pregame. So you'd expect maybe Nebraska is where he comes back. That would be the first time they've had their full starting lineup since the Harvard game. And
the first time, I think, possibly as pertinently, their first time they have their full bench since the Harvard game.
Yeah,
because there have been, not tonight, and again, this is where it's kind of hard to pin a team like this at the moment. There are nights where that bench is a real problem, and then there are nights like tonight where Anthony Walker comes off the bench and plays well, Caleb Banks comes off the bench and plays well, Anthony Leal may not score a lot, but he gives you some important minutes.
And Game Cups is a fine player, but he's a better bench player right now than he started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that was Mike Woodson made some waves when he said I didn't come into the season intending to play him whatever number of minutes. That wasn't a knock on Cups. It was just I had a different role in mind for him that didn't involve him starting and playing all these minutes. The one thing Indiana is allowed to come out of this with is, as you said, they won all these games, and they had to scrap for some of them. Maybe that will serve them well long term. Maybe it won't. Maybe that will harden them for a Big Ten that, quite frankly, is not that imposing at the moment. And we can have a conversation about whether there's enough there for Indiana to get what it needs for an NCAA tournament resume. But right now, Indiana just needs to worry about winning the games in front of it, and sort of figuring out where it is February 1, February 15, and worry about that then. On the other hand, there's some pretty clear problems that have not resolved themselves even through 13 games, which, I find myself saying this every year around this time. It's almost half the season. Now, obviously, Big Ten play is different from a lot of non-conference play, but the sample size is no longer small here. We are almost to the halfway point of this basketball season, and Indiana's still got some pretty clear flaws. It's going to be fascinating. We'll be in Nebraska. Well, he'll be in Nebraska. I'll be at Rutgers. Be excited for me. Newark Airport rental car. Anyway, this is kind of going off the rails. Happy New Year. Indiana 100, Kennesaw State 87. What was it? Malik Renew 34 points, which was a career high. That just backstopped his career high that he scored against Smith Alabama, which is 25. So at least he's, I guess, going into Big Ten play feeling good. Hoosiers are 10-3. They're 2-0 in the Big Ten, and they will restart play in the conference next week. Until then, for the Herald Times, for the Star, I'm Zach Osterman. We'll see you soon.